Hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you again. If you were here last year, you know that I actually announced that I was expecting baby 2 right here on stage. And it's so good to be back again and so blessed to announce that I will not be expecting baby 3 anytime soon. Anytime soon, 1 to 2. Oh my gosh, it was no joke. So incredibly hard. We all know, we've all been there. And you know, I do something on my show, if you've watched it on The Story. It's called The Simple Truth, and it's really a fact-based commentary on like the biggest talker of the day, what people are digging their teeth into. And so I kind of wanted to give it a try here and sort of see how it went. And here's the simple truth. Momming is so incredibly hard, and it's so damn confusing because there's this indescribable love that comes along with it. And it's so much worse now because we live in this Instagram era of perfection. I mean, it's filled with filtered posts and fit moms and Pinterest moms and all of these moms that just remind us that if we tried a little bit harder, maybe we'd be better at being a mom. And you may have seen this viral post that's been going around. It actually has been this week. It shakes every working mom to their core, at least I think. And it's this woman, Sarah Freeberg, and she posted this on Facebook about how society's expectations on us are literally going to kill us. She writes, we're told, go back to work 6 to 8 weeks after having the baby, and then breastfeed for a year. God forbid you can't breastfeed. Oh my God, the shame. And that means pumping multiple times a day at work, but be sure that that doesn't throw you off your game at work because we have to smash that glass ceiling, and then we have to lose that baby weight. But be sure you do self-care and get lots of sleep. But get up at 5 a.m. to work out because we gotta get off that baby weight. And be Santa, the Easter Bunny, the birthday planner. Be fun, but be firm. Read books, no screen time. Do crafts, enough with the crafts. Do meal prep, but be sure it's really healthy. I mean, I could go on and on. She wrote this long post, and I'm reading it, and I'm nodding my head, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And at the end of it, she writes, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to lean out. Yes. Sorry, Sheryl Sandberg, but yes. And why did our parents have it so much easier, it seems? I mean, I'm sure we all remember we were kind of raised by packs. There were neighbors. There were family members. I mean, there were women supporting women before women supporting women was a thing that we're all trying to push now. And we could actually leave our homes and go on a bike ride, and our mom didn't care, and we were gone for hours, and she had no idea where we were. And then we'd get home, and she didn't care if she was mom-shamed for not serving us organic vegetables for dinner. And you know, we're all here bonded in something so much greater than our title as moms. But it's an understanding that much of our success depends on each other. We have to have each other's back and even give each other a break every once in a while because we simply cannot have it all. And together, we can change this crazy, unrealistic expectation that we should. And that is the simple truth. And now please join me in welcoming Amber Tamblyn. She is an author, an activist, an actress, and director who has been nominated for an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and an Independent Spirit Award for her work in TV and film. And she's also this bold and fearless writer who challenges and enthralls her readers, most recently with her highly anticipated and newly released memoir, Era of Ignition, Coming of Age in a Time of Rage and Revolution. It's an exploration of feminism during these very divisive times. She has been on the front lines of this. She co-founded the Time's Up movement in 2018. Please help me welcome Amber Tamblyn.
Wow, look at all these amazing moms.
Are we all right?
Thank you for that intro.
Thank you for being with us. So Amber, how do you balance that crazy expectation that we have? You've got to have it so easy, right? You're a celebrity.
Bloody Marys.
Lots of them.
That is how I balance. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in such a thing. You know, I was just listening to you speak right now, and I think it's so important for each of us to kind of to go at our own pace and come to the world with what we have to offer, not with what we're expected to offer. And for me, you know, it is a real sort of high wire balancing act in many different ways, but I think it's so important to nurture what we feel we are capable of doing in the world, and to do as much as we can to support other women in feeling that way and in not feeling those sort of external pressures in being able to, whether it's parenting or the work you want to do within activism, anything across any of those ideas.
Sometimes I find it so interesting that it's hard to do that because of other women themselves. I mean, we're in a time where you get mom shamed for everything. I love that you shared with me that you weren't able to breastfeed because you couldn't produce milk. I remember the looks that I got when I said I had to stop breastfeeding at 4 months because I was going back to work and it was just not gonna happen for me. And it was like, oh, you made that choice, huh?
Yeah.
And it's just...
And even if it's not said, it's implied, right?
Of course, it's that look
implied.
where you just feel like, oh, I must be a horrible mom.
Yeah.
Why do women do that?
Well, there's this saying too that, fed is best, but I really I don't know if people adhere to that, because ultimately women mothers project out into the world, and when we have these moments of guilt, when we have these moments of shaming other moms or other women, or even if we're shaming women who don't want to have kids, or if we're shaming women who don't want to breastfeed, those are other forms of shaming as well. We're doing this because it's been projected onto us, and so we are reprojecting it onto other women. That's what happens when you are in a container that is a container built by a patriarchal narrative in which the male voice and the male perspective is the dominating factor in any conversation. So we are speaking within a vacuum that's within a smaller vacuum that's within this box in which women are allowed to be very few things. Mothers are allowed to be very few things. So when we speak to each other with that type of language, what we're really speaking is from the perspective of an oppressor. That's all it is. We just have to be very aware of it. I mean, I even found myself, I had so many friends who were telling me, about, the ways in which they were breastfeeding and all of these things, and I always felt such guilt and shame about not being able to produce a lot of milk. I was very sad about it. It was a very sad experience for me. And then I remember, even after knowing that about myself, I went on to tell one of my very closest girlfriends, trying to explain to her the way in which she should be breastfeeding, the way in which she should be doing things. And I caught myself. And I thought, how wonderful would it be if we didn't explain or tell someone else how they're doing something wrong, but instead just amplify and support even the small things that we are doing right. The encouragement, to me, makes all the difference in the world.
I find it interesting that you write in your book about how you spent your whole life as a child actress pretending to be other people for a living. And it's something hard to know what you're capable of becoming or what you will want to once you've stopped. I mean, how difficult was that when you became a mom? And we all have to decide, what kind of mom are we going to be?
Well, it was interesting because when I became a mom, I felt like I was sort of at the end of this personal existential crisis. I'd been acting since I was 11 years old. I'm 35 now, and I became pregnant at a time in which I was really trying to harness my own creative energy and my own voice in this world. All I ever really knew how to do was to go into other people's rooms in the entertainment business and interpret their language as an actress, interpret their character, bring their character to life, bring their world to life. And so in that way, I was only ever really a guest in my own life, if that makes sense. I wasn't really sort of the arbiter of my own truth. And so I had to grapple with that, and I had to really figure out the ways in which I had to put myself on the line to become the thing that I wanted to become. And I don't even know if I'm fully there yet, and I'm sure I'm going to go back and have, another sort of existential crisis at some point. But I think doing those things was sort of was a catalyst to getting to the point at which when I did get pregnant, and it was very interesting because I was pregnant with a girl during the 2016 election. So on election night, when y'all were having your beverages, your alcoholic beverages, for those of you that drink, my ass was having Maalox. It was not fair. It was a tough evening, but I think that in that moment for me, being pregnant and thinking, I knew so much about the way in which women, and not just liberal women, but conservative women, just the way in which women have felt a form of suppression or even oppression in their own experience, whether that's in their personal life or their professional life, how I had felt it in my own personal journey, I was now seeing what would happen when I would give birth to a girl and that it could possibly happen to her. So I was having that realization in seeing what her potential negative trajectory could be out into the world, and it terrified me. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, but having a child, specifically having a daughter, but having a child and becoming a mother weaponized me. It changed, it radicalized me from a fundamental level. And it made me take all of the gut level instincts that I had about the way in which not only I wanted to move in the world, but that I wanted to see the world move and propel them into action no matter the consequences. The consequences became not the issue anymore, and I separated myself from them. I understand that's an extreme privilege to be able to do that, but for me, and I think for most women in general, I don't think that activism is a choice. I think that's our daily living, whether those are in small doses or large doses. And so for me, the act of, becoming a mother transformed me in a radical way.
And Marlo's too. So
She's
a lot
two.
of this is having a conversation with your children and teaching them that power within them. When do you start that conversation, and what do you say?
Well, I think what I think is so great about it is that you don't necessarily have to be having a conversation to have a conversation. Obviously, she's 2 years old, so if I'm like, your mommy's a feminist, and you can grow up and be a feminist, she looks at me and she's like, toast, butter? Like, she's like on another playing field. I'm like, that's fair. It's your choice, whatever you want, as long as it doesn't have sugar in it. But, so even like at a 2-year-old level, it's like hard to talk to her about it. But for instance, as I said to you backstage, one of the things that I do is in her dresser drawer, she's got like, she doesn't have a whole lot of clothes, but friends gift you things, you end up accumulating things, and I've kept the clothing that represents all identities. So I have things in my drawer that would be called, gender neutral, or, she's got stuff with dinosaurs on it and trucks on it. She's got frilly pink tutus, she's got pink tops, she's got things with like tiaras on it. I want her to have choice. And I think what's so important about that's not a conversation that we're having, but that's her telling me what she wants. And I feel like my job as a mother is to just guide that and to nurture it and to let her know that whatever she arrives at, ultimately, is gonna be the right choice. No matter what kind of person she is, no matter what gender she arrives at, no matter who she becomes, is that my job as a parent is to protect as much as I can, to pass down the wisdom that has been passed down to me, and hope she takes some of it and continues on that cycle in her own life.
And you detail a very emotional and difficult road to motherhood in your book.
Yeah.
And you are incredibly vulnerable in it. How did you come out of that the other side in the place where you are now?
I think, for me, so much of this idea of not really having an identity, of only ever being this girl for hire, that felt confused about not the trajectory of where my life was going, but how to get there. I describe it in the book as an invisible alphabet. So, you might be at A or B, and you see this like bright, glowing Z in the future, which is you running your own small business, you having your own voice, you getting to do what you want with your career, you being taken seriously. But it's really hard to manifest the letters in between. It's just a bridging idea. But for me, I really felt that way. Like I knew where I was going. I knew what I wanted to be. I knew that I wanted to direct movies, write books. I had opinions about politics. I had opinions about the way in which women were valued in the world. But I didn't know how necessarily to get those things out there and have them be realized in a certain way. And so I think for many years for me, it took a long time for me to feel like I was going to be able to really be the mom that I knew I was capable of becoming, until I, worked out these things for myself first, which is part of why when I had Marlo, there was so much joy. And I write very openly in the book, which I'll say here to you all, that I terminated a pregnancy in 2012, right after I got married, which seems antithetical to the experience of marriage. But I want to say that to you because I want to destigmatize it, and I want to remind all of us that that there is a value to our choice and to our motherhood and our ability to make decisions and have autonomy over our own bodies. This is equally as important. And for us to arrive in our own independent ways, each of us, with a value to be heard and a value to give to this world as a mother, in whatever capacity we are able to arrive at that. And so that might be for someone who is at a certain age, and it might be for someone who's at another age, and it might be for someone who just never doesn't want that. That also must be nurtured. All of those things are important. And so when we think about being mothers to children, we should be thinking too about being mothers to ourselves, about being parents to ourselves, and to honoring our instinct and knowing when things are right for us. And I would have never, I regret nothing. I would have chosen no other path. And I'm so happy that I am the mother that I am for Marlo now because I did that work, because I studied myself, and because I nurtured myself, because I mothered myself first.
Part of these conversations can be had because you ignited a movement with the Time's Up in 2018. We're now a year later. Do you think we would be farther along? Are you happy with where we are? What else needs to change?
Oh, I think it's incredible what's changed. It's hard to see right now because we're not getting the Jodi Kantor, bombshells and Ronan Farrow bombshells dropping every minute, which it felt like it was that for a moment, and it was. But I think we're sort of past that moment. We're in a different moment now, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you're seeing an unprecedented number of women running for the president of the United States in a way that we've never seen before in this country, and that they're being taken seriously. I don't think it's a coincidence that in 2018 we elected an unprecedented number of not only women, but to the Congress, that we had a first Native American woman, the first trans woman. Those things are not coincidences. And also it's important to recognize and speak to the fact that a lot of the women that have been elected as well were not necessarily personalities that were likable to male standards, to the men who are in positions of power alongside them. And so now you have women who have real opinions and real personalities who are allowed to be there because they didn't ask for the permission anymore. And that's sort of what I feel every woman is doing collectively. So I want to keep bringing that up to say, while we still feel like there's so much that needs to be done, these things might feel small, but they are so important. And it's the cumulative impact of all of this happening at once that is reshaping the way in which women are valued in this country. And that is something to be nurtured and protected by each and every one of us.
I think it can be challenging to sort of have the balance of I'm a feminist and I believe in this, and then being a mom, where you have to really give up a good part of yourself to give your kids absolutely everything. How do you do that?
Somebody once, a mom imparted a great piece of wisdom to me, which I think is like just a known idea, but she said to me, the time you want to spend with your kids is quality over quantity, and that kind of blew my mind open. And as somebody who, has parents who've been together for 45 years, and who was very close with my mom and my parents, I still am. I love them. They're so amazing. But as someone who was very connected with my mother all the way up through my 20s, and really had to individualize at a certain level and find my own path, I can say that I understand that in such a deep way, because what I want to mirror to my daughter, what I want to give to her, is that I have an abundance of love and support, and that I will always be there to give her anything that she needs, but that I am also my own independent person, and I have forged my own way. And I want her to see that because I want her to be able to have that same value for herself. I want her to not be like her mother. I want her to forge a path like her mother, an individual path for herself. So I hope that by doing what I do in the way that I do, that that is important to her, and that she will recognize that, and that in some way will send her out into the world being able to do that for herself.
And we can only accomplish that with letting go of the guilt.
Yeah.
How many people are here feeling guilty that they missed bedtime last night and the little one is screaming for you, where is
bad
mom?
times, guys.
That's
There's
the thing,
so many.
Is where do you say to yourself, I need to do this for me, and let go of the guilt associated with it?
I think it's very individual. It's like it's for each and every person, For me, I think what's been so, I am very much a creature of habit. I'm a triple Taurus, if that means anything to any people who study astrology here. I am stubborn as hell. And so I like having, I like being able to count on things and know when I'm doing something, and I like routine in a certain way. I like all of these things. So for me, I've told myself, as a mother, here is the thing that I want to do with my child, that I say I will always be here to be a part of this experience for her. In a daily routine sense, for instance, I'm always up with my daughter first thing in the morning. I will maybe miss bath time. I will maybe miss story time, but my husband's there. We have different babysitters. We have a community of people. We have poets, we have writers, we have people who are around who will come share in that experience with her. And I was raised that way. I was raised in Southern California around a lot of musicians and poets and writers and artists. And I know how much that gave to me by having a sense of that community. And even if we don't have that community, in any given experience, I think it's important to nurture your kids' surroundings with as many people in their lives as you can, so that they are getting from so many different experiences and so many livelihoods. And so for me, I know in the morning, I always spend that with my daughter. That's sort of my experience. And if I'm not there, I FaceTime in, which is really weird with a 2-year-old, as some of you might know, because they just grab the phone. And she's like, airplane? Airplane? I'm like, mommy is on an airplane. That is where mommy is right now. But so I like having something that feels like, she can always count on this piece from me.
And I wonder if this Instagram ideal that I talked about, it looks like everybody's really nailing it, right? Like we have all these pictures of beautiful Easter Sundays, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't post that my kid threw the Easter cake on my face and then told me how much he hates me and then ran into the room,
I don't know about you guys, but I am killing it at exhaustion.
I mean, should we be more honest on these social media platforms, or should we say, listen, it is what it is, it's just there for a pretty picture of my kid? Just have a different expectation of what that is.
I think, again, we need to return to our physical communities for looking at what we need and how we should be valuing each other. I think Instagram, I think social media is a great place to look at that and to kind of maybe feel like you're living a little bit in a fairy tale in a certain way. But I think it's important that while we're living in these fairy tales, we are also remembering the real stories of us, the truth of us. And that comes from, there's women sitting at all of you are sitting at these tables right now, right? How many of you know who you're sitting next to? Have you spoken to them? Have you met them? Do they live in the Austin area? Are you in different, okay. But
I saw y'all drinking last night.
Did you come from a different state?
I was very jealous.
This is so powerful, this sense of community that we have here. And while we all might come from different socioeconomical backgrounds, different states, different lived experiences, we have a commonality here. That is to be nurtured. That is to be saved and held as truly important, and we can come away from that maybe feeling a little less alone today. And then that, to me, is ultimately the most important thing that we can do, because social media doesn't give us that. It's never going to give us that. It's an echo chamber. It is devoid of true dialogue and true intention and true empathic communication and relationship with other people. But we have that here today in this room, and I think that is the thing that we should be focusing on, especially in a world where, everything feels really intense and painful and difficult and confusing and is draining to us. And so I think we need to be returning back to our physical communities.
Right, so what is the reminder of that, of what motherhood looks like in this era of ignition? How has it changed for your mom, who you're so close to?
My mom, so I'll tell you first, the title of this book, Era of Ignition 2, is what we are, so much of what we are talking about, this sort of condensed time of real change. It is sort of a post-existential crisis within a national current existential crisis, and what we are doing, how we are feeling motivated in our daily experiences to not only live the lives we want, but to speak out at great risk often, which a lot of women we have seen over the last 2 years especially are doing. But I think, I think what is so wonderful is that each of us can take that model and that idea into our experience of motherhood and do what we can not only to nurture ourselves, to take care of ourselves in the best way possible. I know, again, that is a privilege. Not everybody can afford to take care of themselves in the way that they want. But to do that in the small ways that we can afford to do, but then to always remember to be present and mindful of the women that are around us. And that just includes sometimes just checking in. Like simple things like that can go such a long way. Text a friend and just be, how are you feeling today? How are things going? Last night, one of my dear friends, the author Kristen O'Keefe Aptowitz, that's her. She's one of my dear, dear friends. I've known her for such a long time. And as she dropped me off at a dinner last night in the car, she was like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell you this right now. If you're ever feeling like shit and you just need to get pumped up, because I told her how hard putting this book out was, writing a memoir which talks about, my experience in the entertainment business, but just, the conversations, the difficult conversations I'm having with my husband in this Me Too movement moment, and my father even, and the men in my business, and just telling her how difficult it's been. And she was like, if you are ever just feeling like shit and you need me to like pump you up, and she shook as she said it, just pump you up and just tell you like how amazing you are, tell you why your books are amazing, tell you why I love your hair, like whatever you need, just text me and I will put out a list. And I was like, this woman, my friend Kristen, has a 9-month-old that just last night she told me slept for 12 hours for the first time. Can we give her a round of applause for that, by the way? That's a big deal. But I was like, here she is, drained, exhausted with a 9-month-old, finding her own way. And here she is spending a moment with her friend to say, what do you need? If you are feeling it and you don't feel like you have a place to reach out, I'm here. And that is the physical community that I talk about. That is more important than who's in your DMs, than whose abs you're following with whoever's celery juice diet. I love celery juice, by the way.
She does. She had it backstage, and I was like, where did you get celery juice? Do you bring your juicer?
But just saying, like, this is the stuff that matters, and we forget about it sometimes, whether or not we have, because sometimes maybe we don't have a 9-month-old, maybe we have a 7-year-old, maybe we have a teenager, and it's like, we still have a way in which we can actively participate in the women's lives around us, even if those are women we've just met for the first time at a summit, or no matter what the circumstance is, but to feel united in a world that often makes us just feel like we want to be ripped apart and ripped away from each other.
Let's talk about the conversations that you've had with your husband and that you really truly believe he can change. I think probably all of us have had a conversation with our husband where we're just like, come on, it's 2019, like you really still think this way. And he's been criticized publicly for some of his comments. How do you have that conversation, and why do you believe so strongly that he can change?
Well, I have these conversations because men need us.
They really do.
They need us, and we need men.
I'm like, how would you survive without me?
Yes, and I'm not talking just in I'm not just talking in intimate relationships. I'm saying in general, we all need each other. And if you take from the writing of somebody like Bell Hooks, who was a very well-known black feminist who wrote "Feminism is for everybody," and I agree with her. And feminism must be for everybody. And all that means is that you believe in the equality of the sexes. You believe that we should be equal. We should have equal pay. We should have support for both mothers and fathers, new mothers and fathers. We have to believe in these things. And so I wrote about it in the book because it was important for me to show not only my own trajectory and my own learning curve, but to talk about the men I love, my father's learning curve, my husband's learning curve in this, because there is not a woman I have talked to in the thousands of cities I have been to over the last, several years, that is not going through this experience, that is not trying to explain why this revolution, and I refuse to call it anything less than a revolution because that's what it is, why this is so important for us, and why going through the difficulty of the process of revolutionizing something is so important to us, and that we all must participate in it. And that's what I mean when I say men need us and we need men. Because we all have to be a part of, not just identifying the problem, but identifying the solution. So I share it in my book because I want women to feel less alone in their journey, in their own conversations, just in the way that I have felt less alone by talking to my communities, the women in Time's Up, by being able to share these stories and say, oh, you feel this way? Oh, I feel this way too. Let's do something about it. Like, literally today, we could take everyone in this room and we could start Time's Up Mom Summit. We could do it. We could talk about it. Every single person in this room has something to offer, whether you are great at social media, whether you are really good at planning, whether you are great at policy, whether you can just cook for everybody and make sure everyone's fed. Like, whatever the thing is you have to offer, that is how Time's Up started. It was a lot of women that got together in a room and said they wanted something to change, and then changed it without asking for the permission. And so I'm constantly thinking about that at the forefront of this conversation and in the conversations we are having with the men in our lives, and reminding them that we want them here, they are valuable, their opinions matter, but just because those things matter for them does not make ours any less valuable. And so we need to be seeing not only eye to eye, but heart to heart and gut to gut. We need to be connected on all of the levels. And sometimes that takes very difficult conversations. But from the discomfort comes the real change. There's no roadmap for this, and that's okay. That's really okay. It's okay to feel a little lost and out of control right now while things are being uprooted and changing so much. Because out of that chaos comes change.
I'm so curious what that meeting was like, what the room was like, who was in the room, what did you say? Because it was gonna be a bombshell that went off.
You mean that
once you started the Time's Up meeting?
Yeah, well, there was many of them. I write about it in the book, but I think so much of it was just, for the first time ever, women. It's really wild, right? When you are talking about things and planning a future of which you are not certain what that is, but you are certain of what it isn't, what it needs to be devoid of. But when you're having those conversations devoid of the patriarchal perspective, which patriarchal doesn't necessarily mean men, it could be women, it's anybody who is in that position of power, and who usually is abusing it. And so when you're sort of devoid of that and you're with people who are trying to change things, something really magical happens, but also, again, talk about the difficult conversations. Now suddenly you have a room full of women, predominantly white women, who are sitting down with women of color, women who have not had the same lived experiences, and you were realizing that your own feminism has not met the true standards of what you mean when you talk about equality, when you talk about all voices being represented in a room. So we had to face that in our own community. We had to look at that in the entertainment business and go, oh, I thought I was being marginalized? I have not opened my eyes. I have not listened enough. I have not been there in the way that I said I wanted to for my fellow sisters in this community. And so then women were starting to have these really difficult conversations, like these minutia conversations within the larger conversation that is happening. And from that, there were the most powerful bonds and relationships that I have come to know have come out of those gatherings. And what you see now is all of these branches of Time's Up that keep expanding proactively. You see Time's Up Healthcare. We could talk forever about, women's health care, and the fact that there are very few women researchers, women on boards of directors at hospitals. Women are predominantly left out of the healthcare business. And so there was 2 doctors out of New York, and I think maybe DC, I'm not sure, but who saw this issue in their own industry. And they came to Time's Up and they said, we want to start Time's Up Healthcare. And everyone was like, absolutely, 100%, we got your back, we love this idea. And that's just, again, about creating equality. And that is, again, about the tangible connection between people, the living communities within each of us. That's not a social media post. That's women talking to other women. That's men talking to other men, holding each other accountable, having the autonomy of our story in that way.
Let's talk about mental health in women. We recently did a story about the new postpartum drug that had come out, and you have to be in the hospital for like 6 days, and it's like $35,000. And I was like, this was clearly not developed by a woman who in the world has 6 days to stay in the hospital. I mean, sometimes, we would love it. It'd be great to get a break and get some rest. But, it's amazing to me that, we carry these babies for 10 months, and then the second they're out of us, nobody's asking, are you okay?
Yeah.
No doctor ever said, how are you doing? They just jump on the baby. How do we change that mentality? Because postpartum's real. Postpartum psychosis is real. Baby blues, we know everybody experiences.
I want to say, too, that postpartum is also real for fathers.
That's right.
It's something we don't talk enough about, and I think it's a very important piece of the puzzle. So we talk about the equality of emotion. We talk about the equality of what and who we care for. We can't leave anybody out of the conversation, just as we do not want to be left out of the conversations ourselves. I know from my own experience, for close to a year after I had Marlo, I was writing a book while I was pregnant with her, and another book after, and I had such severe inflammation, not in my ankles, not in usual places, but I got such severe inflammation in my arms and my wrists and my hands. I had bilateral Decker vein syndrome and carpal tunnel for 9 months, and I had to wear these plastic gloves. So even when I was breastfeeding her, and I sometimes blamed a lot of my inability to have milk because I couldn't really express. I had these hard plastic gloves that would hit her in the face, hit her in the back of the head. I couldn't really grab my own breast. And I had to wear them for so long, and I saw doctors, I saw acupuncturists, I saw osteopaths, I saw holistic Western, I got cortisone shots in my wrists, I did everything to try to fix them. And it was really this acupuncturist, this woman that I know, Vicky, who ultimately was telling me that every woman's body uniquely heals at its own pace, but we don't have the luxury or the option to allow it to heal at the pace it needs to heal. And sometimes that's a year, sometimes that's 5 years. It's a huge, monumental event that happens to our physical and emotional and frankly spiritual selves. And we don't live in a society that nurtures that. America really, if you look at it, if you look at its laws, if you look at its, within the Constitution, we are a nation that does not reserve a lot of space or respect for motherhood or parenthood, period. It's seen as something that you just do quickly and get over and finish it and get right back to work, because if you don't, you can't afford to live in this country. So to me, I think, in any way that we can do what we can to find out how, again, we can be supported by others, but to also recognize our own space and capacity to feel grief, to feel whatever emotion we need to feel after having a child, and to feel supported certainly by our partners in the process of doing that. Because our bodies, while they belong to us, they also don't belong to us. They are their own organism, and they heal at the pace that they are able to heal, and we need to really nurture that.
You have this incredible platform to get these messages across because of your career in acting. It gave you this celebrity, but you took a break from that for a while.
Yeah.
And now you've decided to get back into it. Why, and why now?
Well, I've always loved acting, but I've been doing it since I was 11 years old. So I think while I love it, it wasn't feeding me anymore. It wasn't challenging to me. And I knew I had these other experiences that I really wanted to do with my life. There were books I wanted to write. There were, I wanted to direct a movie. I wanted to produce content. I wanted different things for myself. So while I still love it, it just wasn't very challenging to me. I'm very excited to be doing a show for FX called Why the Last Man. And that is a character unlike anything I've done before. And I'm hoping I get the sense that because I have done all these other things, because I feel so present in my experience and my body and who I am today, that will just come as sort of like a cherry on top. Whereas before it was always, it always felt like the cake I couldn't have. Once in a while I would get a sliver and then I would starve for years and years, either playing characters I didn't love, or just not working or whatever those situations are. And so now I feel tied and more connected to the experience of acting in a way that I didn't before, because it just sort of feels like a bonus, an added joy.
We're seeing now in movies or TV that what is playing out in society is what's going into scripts, and the storylines really mirror what we're seeing. Is that going to be the case in your new show?
Yes.
Well? And in what way?
The show is based on a DC graphic novel called Why the Last Man, in which there is a defect in the Y genome in which all men drop dead at the same time.
But
and
we need them.
women are left to run the world, which is awesome, but also, of course, very problematic. So it ends up sort of being like a women's Lord of the Flies in a certain way. I haven't seen the scripts or the trajectory of where the show's going, but I know I get to play someone who is wholly unlike my own personal values or anything that I've ever gotten to play before, and I'm excited to sort of stretch my experience as an actress in that way.
And finally, in your book, you write a letter to your daughter.
Yeah.
What did you say, and what letter would you write to yourself?
So interesting you asked me that, because the letter started as a letter to my child self. I think when I was going through a lot of the experiences that I went through, I'm privileged to have a really great therapist that I've worked with for a long time, and I highly recommend therapy. I think it's great. There's nothing shameful about it. We need sounding boards. We need to have people that we can talk to and say the deepest, darkest, most difficult parts of ourselves, to be able to speak the truth of that. And he actually, I think in the process in my 20s, was the one that told me, he's like, I want you to find a photograph of yourself from when you were really young, when you were a kid. In a moment that the photograph captures a moment in which you are having an unencumbered joy. You are in the middle of fun. Whatever it is, the photo, I would like to know, I want it to capture that in a time in which you were just having the best time of your life. And so I found this photo, this old Polaroid in my mom's photo books of me on a rocking horse when I was maybe about 3 or 4 years old. And I'm in mid-swing, and my hair is kind of like flowing back, and I've got this big, giant grin on my face. And I clipped it in my journal. And he wanted me to just look at it every day, like whether it was in the morning before I did my writing time. And it was very quickly that photo constantly brought me to tears, constantly. And it made me very emotional thinking about not only, I think, the sacrifice of my own childhood in a certain way by being an actress, by giving my entire life to this business that often gives nothing back to women in return. But also remembering what brings me joy and what I have to offer in the world that makes me happy. And I think the crying was sort of this like release of all of those old feelings, and remembering that I needed to nurture and protect myself and the child self inside of me. So the letter that I wrote at the end started as a letter to myself, and it was my wonderful editor, Trisha, who said, so now I want you to take this, and she was like another form of therapy, in which she's like, I want you to take this and now make it for your daughter. Like these same feelings you've had for yourself, of protecting yourself, of nurturing yourself, of all of the things that you want for yourself, and I want you to translate them out for her. The letter is for her, but it also is for all of our children, our girls and our boys, in just talking about this idea of where we want to see the future land for them, how we want them to be able to have the freedom of their own wisdoms and the ability to arrive at the type of person that they want to be